Good morning, Peg.
Emile Marie?
Yes, Emile Marie, after my mom and dad.
Okay, we'll hear more about that a little bit later. Thank you for coming in from Warren, Michigan to do this special interview so we can have your history, so we can know how your journey began and where it began, and so we can all enjoy reliving your life with you at this time. So let's start with your beginnings. You grew up, and where'd you grow up, and a little bit about your parents and your schooling?
Well, I grew up actually on the east side of Detroit. I was in St. Jude's Parish, but I came at the age of 2, and my mom and dad had bought a house that was, needing a lot of fixing up and everything. So I saw that happening. I saw the love that went into, all the penny pinching that we did because of the Second World War, because that had started when I was about 5, and because I was born in 1935, and my whole family, as I said in my autobiography, it was all part of my growing up. I didn't do this alone,
So when you talk about your whole family, it's your immediate family plus your extended family.
Correct.
Because you're very close, as I read in your
Yes.
autobiography.
Yes, very close to all the cousins now, to the 4th and 5th generation. I just got an email, and we're going to be meeting in a couple weeks, just before Thanksgiving, because they probably have to. My cousin is going to have the whole gang over in Wixom. So.
But your parents, they grew up where?
They grew up. Well, my dad was born in Sudbury, Ontario.
Okay.
Sudbury, Ontario, and he came down at the age of 12. And
when you say he came down, what do you mean?
They came down to Windsor, Ontario. They're
So
from Canada. Sudbury is Canada, Ontario.
Is it north?
It's north, way north of the Sioux.
That's what you mean when you say
Right,
he came down.
right.
Okay.
And then my mother was born right outside of Windsor in Tecumseh.
Yeah.
And but anyway, they settled in East Windsor, and then I. Had many cousins. They were my cousins that lived next door. So I was like, they mentored me, because I always had a teenager or somebody telling me what to do or where to go, and so that was nice, to have that. And then as I wrote also about, I talk about the darkness that came when my grandfather died, and. It still almost brings tears to my eyes too, because I depended on him so much, and I loved him so much, and my whole world kind of crashed at the age of about 4 and a half when he died, because in those days women wore black for a year. My mother started wearing black, and everything was, we couldn't play the piano next door with my cousins.
You say you were very close to your grandfather. What was that relationship like? It was
total love. I would crawl up on his lap when he was saying the rosary, and I would just sit there, or he would take me, and I would be all alone with nobody else, and he would take me down to the candy store and let me pick out some candies, and then he'd give me like a whole bag, and I'm sure in those days it only cost a nickel, but it was a lot of, and I used to eat these nonpareils. They're none like them. They're little pieces of chocolate with white sprinkles on top. And I still think that's my association with my Pippi. We called him Pippi. But anyway, I was very close to both of them. My grandmother, my Mimi, died 17 months later.
Oh, close.
And so anyway, things changed over there, and we would still go, because my mother's sisters and all their kids and stuff, they were getting married and all this, because there were 10 of them. And so it was like one big, and lots of fun. So that kind of eased all the other stuff, but it was never the same again. And then on my father's side, he had 14 brothers and sisters, but only 9 of them lived to adulthood. So I really didn't know the first 5 because some were stillborn, but some died at the age of 3. And one had come down with them down to Windsor, and he had died at the age of 12. And it was like some mysterious illness. It wasn't diphtheria or what, but they didn't even have a funeral. They just, they laid him out on the couch, and a few neighbors came, and that was
so both of your
big.
parents came from a large family.
Right.
And your family, your mother and dad had your siblings.
Yes.
How many?
We had 3.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there were two siblings, my sibling. We lost Louise.
Uh-huh.
She was 6 years old, and she died November the 9th, right after VJ Day.
Mm-hmm.
That was also very significant because immediately after her funeral, my sister Lenore, who was still, she had been born in 1944, so she was just little. She was only like about 18 months or something when Louise died, and so she was always looking for her. She didn't know what happened to her. So, death. Oh yes, very hard. It was. As an adult, looking back, I could see, it was very, very difficult for them. Well, both of them. I mean, it changed everything.
Mm-hmm.
So to the point where we buried my sister on a Monday, we buried Louise on a Monday, and on Tuesday, both Lenore and I came down with this lobar pneumonia. That's what took Louise. And my mother thought she was going to lose all 3 of us. And so, I mean, it was to the point where I was old enough, I was 9, so Lenore was now sleeping with me in the same double bed, and I would wake up at night and I would put my hand on her to see if she was still breathing.
Oh
after we got better. And I missed 3 months of school when I was in 4th grade.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to make it up, and the teacher would send material with my girlfriend, and I would do, at home. I didn't write a lot about that, but I mean, those are very real things, and people say, well, that's in your past. Oh, but that's what I don't know. I'm struggling with that, but it occurred to me much, much later when I was almost finished, about maybe 3 or 4 years ago. I was still working on my autobiography. I would do it during retreat. I would take a couple days of retreat and just write another era, another time. And it occurred to me that when sisters write their autobiography, which I've been encouraging people to do now too, I said, it's not just about you. It's about our whole congregation, because one of the questions is, how did the Dominicans influence you, or how did you learn about the Adrian Dominicans? And that's another era in my life, because when school started, when I had to go to school, I could no longer stay for a whole week at a time and come home maybe one day from Windsor. And by the way, we did that on the bus too. We did not have a car in those days. So I had to start school. So I went to the public school because we had no Catholic school at that time. It was too far.
Where were you living at that time?
On the east side. And that's where we lived. My parents lived there for 49 years, even after I entered.
But talking about Windsor.
But what I'm saying is, I used to, when I was little and didn't have to go to school, and they didn't have preschools in those days, I almost lived over there, because my dad would come over like on the weekends, because he had to work. He worked at Jail Hudson's downtown, and in those days you crossed on the ferry. There was no tunnel, there was no bridge, that we could use, and we had no car, so you had to take a bus to go back and forth. And Mom was taking care of her mom and dad during those 4 years before I went to school, 5 years, because both of them had cancer. And she was taking care of both of them. Mm-hmm. And so after that, we had to start, because I had to go to school. And then by that time, other things, Lenore was born, and so in the between, I was the first one, Louise was next. She was born in 39, and then Lenore came in 44. And So when I started school, I went to public school, and I loved school. Kindergarten was all about playing in the sandbox, making decorations and stuff for a Christmas tree that was on the board, you know, learning how to make chains and stuff, kindergarten. And also, we had music, and music was always something that lifted my spirit, you know, about what was going on and everything. So
and was that your first beginnings with music, because you have a good voice? Yeah.
Yes, but that wasn't discovered, really. I mean, I just thought everybody sang like that, you know.
Okay.
So, I mean, that was later. But, so I went to public school, and I loved both of them. I really still remember my teachers,
Okay.
and I remember their names and everything. And I loved the first grade. Well, in first grade, we started learning to read. It wasn't just, you know, dancing around and marching and music and playing with artsy stuff, you know, kinds of things, arts and crafts, and listening to stories, but we were starting to learn to read. And so, as I pointed out, my first experience of what I would call prejudice, today we would probably call it bullying, but the teacher started teaching sight words. We had sight, we weren't into phonics yet. Nobody was into phonics at that time. And she wrote those color words on the board. And I raised my hand and I said, I know how to say that differently. And she looked at me, you know. And so when she put a block of paper, red paper, and put the word red on the board, I said, that's rouge, rouge, and bleu, and vert, and jaune. And in those days, in that classroom, we did not have bilingual children.
No,
I was bilingual, though.
Mm-hmm.
However, there was one girl that was in the front seat. She had her book in front of her, and she was laughing at me. Yeah, crazy. But she didn't do anything in the classroom. We left the school, and my girlfriend who lived next door was a half a year ahead of me. In those days, the semesters could start in January in the public school. Mm-hmm. So I was a half a year behind her. But I was waiting for her, and I went down to the bottom of the stairs and at the school, and I was waiting for my girlfriend, and this girl who laughed at me in the classroom came up to me, and she shoved me against the wall. And she said, "You talk so funny," you know. And I was really hurt. I didn't know what caused this, you know. So I cried all the way home. I ran home, and I burst into the house, and I said, "I'm never speaking French again," you know. So that was when I hear today about people being bullied or because of anything, because of their color, because of their ethnicity, whatever. See, in our whole neighborhood, we were the foreigners at that time. Mm-hmm. And so we grew up with German people, and then of course we were at war with them, you know, during the war. However, in that neighborhood, there wasn't any of that animosity.
So did you speak French at home?
We spoke French at home, French and English.
Okay.
But when my parents wanted to say something, now Lenore never really caught on the whole thing, you know, but when my mom and dad wanted to say something, they'd have to go in the bedroom or something because Jeanine, big ears, could understand what they were saying.
Okay, so then grade school was public school, all of grade school?
No, no, then in first grade, they opened, when I was in first grade, I only had a half a year of first grade. Then they opened St. Jude's School with 5 Adrian Dominicans, and that was my first encounter with the Adrian Dominicans. And my first teacher was Sister Gonzalva, and I looked up her name. She was from, I couldn't pronounce her last name. It begins with like Sudlulki or something like that. I could not pronounce it. I practiced it, but then the one that really influenced me a lot was, I mean, she did too. She was fun. That was the first thing that I noticed about the Adrian Dominicans. I knew nothing about sisters. I just knew they were there in the morning and they were there at night when we left, and I didn't know what happened after that, you know. But they seemed to be so joyful. Joyful friars, you know, joyful sisters. They were always having fun. Now, even with Sister Gonzalva on the playground, She would play, you know, like I was a marionette or something. She would put a rope around our, you know, and make us jump up and down. And we did that kind of stuff because we didn't have any playground equipment or anything at that point. So then I get Sister Claire Genevieve. And Sister Claire Genevieve opened my own mind again. One day I go in and she had the older girls choir. She was playing the piano and they were working on the liturgy in Latin. And Jeanine comes in and I go in the back and I am singing softly along with, she's playing it, and she called me. She said, "Jeanine, do you want to sing with the choir?" And I said, I was so embarrassed. And you know what? I can't believe that I was so embarrassed. But I was. I said, no, that was fine. But then she recognized that. And then I was very fortunate because in 6th grade I got her again. And by that time I was already thinking about going to the convent. You know, I was thinking, I want to be like these sisters. They have so much fun.
So where did you end up at high school? Dominican?
Dominican.
Oh.
And then that started another round
Right.
of,
Right.
I mean, Dominican provided the background or the place of growth in some of the subjects that I love so much. Like, it was really the first time we really had science, and I loved science. And then I could take French again because I had made up my mind I wasn't going to ever speak French again. And I learned by the time I was in 8th grade that I had done something very stupid, you know, because you don't use it, you lose it. So I had a difficulty after that. I never lost the facility to understand it when they were speaking. But, so I decided I was going to take it up again. And
so you had two gifts that you became more aware of, your singing and then the French. And this
the
was
French,
in high school. So
but another gift that Claire Genevieve pointed out in 6th grade was my artistic ability. She taught. I looked forward to Friday afternoons because on Friday afternoon, whatever other subject, whatever it was in the afternoons, on Friday afternoon we had art. And I still remember her teaching us about shadows and shading from Gainsborough's Blue Boy, because the velvet outfit has all kinds of shadings and where the sun is. So after that, every time I drew a picture and colored it and stuff, I always thought, where's the sun coming from? Or where's the light coming from? And I would shade pictures and stuff like that. Now, I don't have any paintings and stuff like that could, but I could do it. I think I could. I've done other things.
So then during high school, is that when you thought seriously about your vocation?
Oh, I had already done it. I'd already, I mean, I actually.
And there was not
Yeah, no.
there was not a question of what
No, by
group
that,
to
but
go to.
I one of the things that I also did early on was I started collecting pamphlets, articles from the newspaper, from the Michigan Catholic, about different nuns in different places. And I had a box. I had a little cigar box that I would put it in, and I kept it all. But all the time, even visiting with my girlfriend's former teachers who were Sisters of St. Joseph and everything, I was always, you know, coming back and saying, in fact, in my autobiography, I also mention, and every time I come to Adrian, I think of that first day that I came to Adrian at the age of 11. I was 11 years old, and my birthday, I said to my dad, I want to go and see Adrian. And it was during during Advent, I'm sorry. And I came and I looked in all these windows in the front, you know.
So not all these buildings were here at that time?
I didn't see anybody or
you didn't
anything
see
that day.
anybody?
Nobody.
No,
I didn't
you were
go
at Madden
inside.
Hall.
I went to Madden Hall, and I went to the one window where St. Teresa used to be, where it was just at the bottom of the stairs. You know, and I went up the stairs. My dad sat in the car while I ran up and down the stairs and looked in the window like I had when I was in 1st grade. I got in trouble in 1st grade.
But you didn't come in the buildings here?
No.
Oh. You drove all the way from Detroit so you could look in the window?
The whole day. It took, and it was my birthday, and it was the 28th of November. And we came all the way and went all the way back, and it was like, wow. And I came back one other time when they were having some kind of concert or something at you know, not at Madden Hall, but, you know.
Siena.
Yeah, at Siena. So I came back for that, and then at that time I talked to some of the girls who were preps, you know, and I wanted to be a prep. But my dad said, I think you better
And a
wait.
prep, maybe for those that are watching by way of YouTube, what's a prep?
A prep, the preps were young girls that were still in high school. I mean, they could enter the prep school at the, you know, in 9th grade.
Right. Okay.
And it was just like maybe a faster way, or I mean, they were already living a semi-religious life in a way, community life.
So you thought about that, but you didn't, you waited till
I
you
wanted
finished
to.
high
I had a
school.
girlfriend who went, but she came back in about 6 weeks or something like that. So I thought, well, you know,
So you came after high school.
right. Well,
Okay.
I couldn't wait anymore, so I did not graduate at Dominican. I entered in my senior year, and then I got my diploma from Dominican, but at Siena with the rest of the girls who were, I mean, it was at, you know, at Walsh Hall where we graduated, but
And
I
how
was
was that
already-
when you left home with your leaving Lenore?
Oh.
That had to be,
Lenore was very upset. My mother told me later that when they came home after I had entered on February 2nd, a long, dreary ride. In those days, there were no freeways and stuff. And when she came home, my mother said she worried about her. This was after, you know, after everything settled down. But she came home, and for 3 days, she just sat on the bed and just stared into space. And she said she didn't even get up. I talked to her about it after. She didn't even get up and look to see, you know, like she had the whole bedroom now to herself because we had to share this bedroom. We even had a piece of tape in the middle of the closet. This is your side, this is my side. And she was so disappointed. In fact, when we went the day of our entrance, after I got my postulant's outfit and we went in for benediction in Holy Rosary, I heard this loud sobbing. I didn't know who it was. It was Lenore. She was crying. And of course, what she didn't know at that time, I was praying for her, a vocation for her too. And God answered that prayer. She did, you know.
so
But
you were here for formation, and then when you, after you made profession, we can't go into
I
all
know.
of your ministries, but let's think about maybe one significant or two significant that made an impression on you and were transformative, I would say, for you and for those with whom you associated.
all of my missions were, well, to begin with, they were all far away except for Walled Lake. You know, I made profession in the morning and I was at Walled Lake, Michigan, you know, up near Wixom. I was there for 4 years. And I guess when I look back on all the places that I taught, California, the Upper Peninsula, each time it was the era too. When I went to California, we began Vatican II.
Okay.
And so things were changing a lot, and so that was very impressive. I mean, we learned how to have house meetings, and some of the first house meetings were kind of disastrous, you know, the ones that we had.
Now, a
But
house meeting, you lived with a group of sisters.
a group of sisters,
And
yes,
so
in a
If you
convent.
could just explain that a little bit.
Well, a house meeting was before, you know, we had a vow of obedience, and the superior, you know, whatever superior said to do, or when she said to do it, or whatever, was, and that was your fulfillment of your vow. You did it, yes, yes, sister, you know, and you go do it. But after Vatican II, it was more collegial. It was, you know, we were supposed to have house meetings, and the sisters could give their opinion about something, or talk about, you know, the problems that they were having, or, you know, could we do it this way or something like that. We had a voice. That was the important thing. And it made an impression because it kind of quelled all of the, I had a long period in my life when I was struggling with rules and regulations and all this stuff, and I was very scrupulous at one point where I really, you know, God loved my confessor at Dominican High because I was really conflicted about a lot of things in the church and that was before Vatican II. So then when Vatican II came, it was, you know, you know. So anyway, the thing that impressed me probably the most was that I found out later that some of the things that I had done in the classroom and everything, you know, people remembered it, or I had made a difference in their life. And I think that's the important thing.
Who made a difference in your life? Is there someone?
Well, I think, first of all, you know, I was very, very fortunate to have wonderful parents. I think that's the most, but in school, I would say Claire Genevieve, because she was also my sponsor, even though she couldn't come with me, because by that time she had been transferred. She was now principal up in the Sioux when I entered. So I came with Sister Joanne Fleischhacker.
Okay.
I called her Marie Bernard. She was Marie Bernard. And she also, now one of the big things that happened in grade school, and that was probably because of Sister Claire Genevieve, I was Snow White in the play that they had. And we had all 1,200 kids at Denby High School. For one night, we got permission. I learned this later, but we had permission from Walt Disney to use the music that was in the movie. And so we practiced day and night for like 3 months for that play. One-nighter, just a one-nighter. And it was filled. I don't know, 1,000 people came for, you know. And it was like a fundraiser, too. But I was Snow White, and I married my prince. But my prince in my own heart already was, you know, Jesus. So the whole thing kind of fit in together.
So you sang.
I sang.
Nice.
Someday my prince will come.
Yeah.
You know, and it was like a prayer, really. And that influenced me, you know, even later.
Right.
And I couldn't get away from it either, because I was downtown one time with my girlfriend, and a bus pulled up, and a little girl yells out the window, "Mom, there's Snow White."
Cute.
And so anyway, but I didn't let it go to my head, because, you know, I had other things to do. But I still sing. I sing in the car, especially, you know, see how high I can go and that kind of stuff.
Don't
But
we all sing in the car when we're by ourselves?
yeah, you do too? Yeah, that's good. I think, you
It's
know.
the only place it's safe for me to sing.
Right.
Yeah.
So as I said before, all the sisters that I lived with, I mean, of all the sisters I lived with, I would say, you know, most of them, 99% of the sisters were so supportive and so helpful. And I still, to this day, if I see somebody, you know, that I worked with and everything, I think some of the other significant things, more recent, would be like when Lenore and I went down and worked in New Orleans, you know. Today I can't do that. I mean, I cannot do that anymore. I cannot do drywalling. I cannot kneel down and on the floor for hours and lay the linoleum.
You're very generous with your time, and when something is, you know, something is asked, you're one of the first ones to respond if you can. So
Yeah.
that's a blessing to know yourself that well, that you
Well,
know what you can and can't do at this time of your life. And you've had some health challenges, not that we need to get into those.
right.
But
They remind me every day.
as you look at your challenges, you know, how have they helped contribute to the woman you are today?
I believe that those challenges help me to get into other people who are even sometimes more challenged than I am. You know, I think about, you know, because sometimes, you know, I can get impatient. I get very impatient. I get impatient with myself a lot. But it always brings me back to, you know, what if you had that besides what you have, you know? Because I can, sometimes I try to slog through stuff, and there's a limit sometimes. I am not who I was when I was on this campus. My nickname when I was a novice was Jet. Now I call myself Jet Lag.
Cute.
Are we getting to the end?
Yeah.
I would like to end with a haiku. I hated haikus when I was taking it at Siena. I hated it. I didn't like it. I like words, as you know, and I did not like the confinement and the rules and everything. But I have my autobiography written, and I hope that other sisters will do that soon, because it's just not about you, it's about, everybody that helped you along.
That's a good thing to say as you're on the videotape, as as we're inviting more of our women to come and tell
you
their
can do
story.
it, as I'm saying, you can do it. And I've been sitting, in the cafe and listening to people's stories, and I'm thinking, wow, what a treasure trove. Anyway, these are questions for Abba, the potter. What will my final throwing, molding be? Am I ready for glazing? My autobiography starts with one, and that was the one about the beginning. And that was a moment in time to begin, to end in love, spoken word, my life.
In the name of the congregation, we thank you for who you are and what you have been for us and with us. And may you continue to be as generous as you've always been, even though your jet lag is, which we all seem to have experienced, but you're still moving.
I'm still moving even with the Amigo.
That's right, that's right. Thank you so much for